"White doctors only beyond this point," Dr. Harold Whitmore said. He did not whisper it. He said it in the bright surgical corridor of St. Adrian Medical Center, in front of nurses, interns, orderlies, a mother holding her sick son hand, and a black surgeon standing one step from the red line on the floor. Dr. Isaiah Bennett looked down at the line. Then he looked at the boy on the rolling bed. Caleb Thompson was 10 years old. His lips were pale. His small chest rose too fast beneath the blanket. His mother, Maya, held his fingers like the world would fall apart if she let go. Isaiah carried an old brown surgical bag in his left hand. It had belonged to his mother, a community nurse who taught him that a hospital door was not holy unless it opened for the person in pain. Nurse Naomi Brooks stepped forward. "Dr. Whitmore, this is Dr. Bennett." Whitmore cut her off without turning. "No one asked you." The corridor went still. Dr. Elena Shaw, the anesthesiologist assigned to Caleb's case, stopped beside the medication cart. 2 interns froze near the scrub station. A security guard at the access desk looked at the badge scanner, then at Isaiah, then back at Whitmore. Whitmore pointed at the red line. "Security, remove him from the surgical wing." Maya gasped. Isaiah did not shout. He only said, "Are you sure you want to say that in a surgical wing operating under my facility license?" Whitmore stared at him. "Your license?" Then he laughed. 30 minutes later, when the state health inspector opened the facility record, that laugh would disappear. By then, the hospital director would not be explaining one insult. He would be explaining why he had tried to remove the responsible physician from the only license keeping the cardiac surgical suite open. But at 6:48 that morning, Whitmore still believed the hospital belonged to him. St. Adrian Medical Center looked expensive enough to make fear feel out of place. The floors shone, the walls were white, the private waiting rooms had soft chairs and framed donor names. The cardiac surgical wing had opened 1 year earlier with photographers, ribbon cutting, and a promise that St. Adrian would bring world-class heart care to every patient who needed it. That was the public story. The private story had more doors. Patients with premium insurance moved quickly. Patients with weak insurance waited. Families from the South Ward were asked for extra forms. Doctors whose names were unfamiliar were checked twice. Nurses who objected were told to be practical. Dr. Harold Whitmore called all of it standards. He liked that word. Standards sounded clean. Standards sounded medical. Standards could hide almost anything if spoken by the right man in the right white coat. Isaiah Bennett had arrived early because he wanted to see what the hospital looked like before the official visit began. The first supported surgery under the new outreach program was scheduled for Caleb Thompson at 7:30. Bennett Surgical Institute had selected the child after 3 hospitals delayed the referral. St. Adrian had the room, the equipment, and the agreement. Caleb did not have time for image management. That was why Isaiah came with no entourage, no press staff, and no announcement from the front desk. He wore a plain, dark coat over his scrubs. His hospital identification card was inside his bag because the old badge clip had broken. He wanted to observe. What he saw told him enough. At the financial services counter, Maya Thompson was being handed another packet. "I already signed these," she said. The clerk did not look at her son. "The system says we need confirmation of assistance eligibility." Naomi Brooks appeared from the surgical hall and took the papers. "This was cleared yesterday." The clerk lowered her voice. "Dr. Whitmore office asked us to confirm again." Naomi's face tightened. "Caleb's surgery is in 40 minutes. I am only following instructions." Isaiah stood near the wall and watched Naomi place the packet back on the counter. Then she said, "The instruction is wrong." That was the first time Isaiah noticed her. The second thing he noticed was Dr. Malik Grant, a black surgical resident, standing at the access desk, while a security guard scanned his badge twice. "It already cleared," Malik said. The guard looked uncomfortable. "Dr. Whitmore wants double verification on visiting surgical staff today." "I am not visiting staff. I am on rotation here." The guard scanned again. The green light appeared. Malik entered without another word, but his jaw stayed tight. Isaiah looked toward the cardiac surgical wing. The red line on the floor marked the controlled access boundary. Beyond it were scrub rooms, operating rooms, sterile storage, and the short hallway leading to Caleb room. A hospital can reveal itself at a boundary. Who is slowed? Who is waved through? Who must prove twice what others are allowed to assume once? Naomi turned from the financial counter and saw Isaiah. For 1 second, surprise changed her face, then recognition. "Dr. Bennett." Her voice carried relief before she could hide it. "Thank you for coming early." Isaiah stepped toward her. "How is Caleb?" "Unstable, but ready. Dr. Shaw has anesthesia prepared. The blood products are confirmed. Room 3 is set." "And the delay at financial services?" Naomi glanced toward the counter. "Unnecessary." That one word held more anger than a speech. Isaiah nodded. "Take me to the room." Naomi turned toward the red line. That was when Whitmore appeared. He came from the private elevator with 2 administrators behind him and a folder under one arm. His white coat was spotless. His silver hair was combed back. His badge read Hospital Director, but his expression said Owner. He saw Naomi first, then Isaiah, then the old surgical bag. His eyes narrowed. "Who is this?" Isaiah answered before Naomi could. "Isaiah Bennett. I am here for Caleb Thompson surgery." Whitmore looked him up and down. "You are not cleared for this wing." Naomi stepped in. "Sir, he is." Whitmore raised one finger. "Do not interrupt me." Naomi went silent, but her face changed. Elena Shaw had just reached the hall. She heard enough to stop. Whitmore looked at Isaiah again. "Where is your visible identification?" "In my bag." "That is not how we operate here." Isaiah placed the surgical bag gently on the side table, then verify it. Whitmore smiled in a way that made the corridor colder. "I do not need instructions from a man who walks into my operating wing with a bag and no visible credential." Isaiah said, "This is not your operating wing." A few people heard it. A few people understood that something had shifted. Whitmore did not. He stepped closer and pointed at the red line. "This area is restricted to approved surgical personnel. I am approved." "By whom?" Isaiah looked at the cardiac suite sign above the hall. "By the license under which this suite operates." Whitmore laughed once. "That is enough." Maya Thompson stood beside Caleb's bed, still holding his hand. "Please," she said, "my son needs his surgery." Whitmore did not even look at the child. "Madam, the hospital will manage the schedule," Naomi said. "Caleb cannot wait." Whitmore turned on her. "I said no one asked you." Elena Shaw finally spoke. "Dr. Whitmore, the operating room is ready. The patient is high priority. Any delay increases risk." Whitmore's voice hardened. "I will not allow disorder in front of a donor tour and a pediatric patient." Isaiah looked at Maya. "Donor tour?" Maya's eyes filled with fear. "They told me there was a scheduling issue." Naomi did not look away from Isaiah. "The donor tour arrives at 8. Whitmore's face tightened. "Nurse Brooks." Naomi stopped speaking, but the truth had already entered the hallway. Isaiah picked up his surgical bag. "Dr. Whitmore, I am crossing that line to evaluate my patient." Whitmore moved into his path. "No, you are not." The security guard took one step forward. The 2 interns looked at the floor. Malik Grant stood near the scrub room, one hand closing around the towel in his fist. Caleb coughed weakly. That small sound did what no argument could do. It reminded everyone that the corridor was not about pride, it was about a child heart. Isaiah looked at Whitmore. "Move." Whitmore's voice dropped. "You people always think pressure changes standards." Naomi whispered, "Sir, stop." He did not. He pointed again at the red line. "White doctors only beyond this point." The words struck the corridor like a dropped instrument tray. No one moved. Maya covered her mouth. Elena Shaw's face went pale with anger. Malik Grant looked at the security guard as if daring him to obey. Naomi's eyes filled, but she kept standing. Isaiah did not blink. He had heard many versions of that sentence in his life. Some wore polished language. Some came wrapped in policy. Some came as delays, extra forms, second checks, quiet refusals. This one was simply honest enough to become evidence. He looked at the ceiling corner, access camera. Then at the nurse's station, electronic surgical log. Then at Whitmore. You just turned a staffing issue into a license issue. Whitmore scoffed. You are not listening. I am listening very carefully. Whitmore turned to security. Remove him. The guard hesitated. Sir, should we verify his name first? Whitmore snapped. I am the director of this hospital. Isaiah said, and if the cardiac surgical suite license is suspended, you will be the director of a hallway. That stopped the guard. It did not stop Whitmore. He stepped closer to Isaiah until only the red line separated them. You have 5 seconds to leave before I call police. Isaiah took out his phone. Then call legal first. Whitmore smiled. You think legal works for you? Isaiah said. On this wing they should. He dialed one number. Elaine Porter answered on the second ring. Dr. Bennett? Naomi heard the name and closed her eyes. The room knew now. Not all of it, but enough. Isaiah kept his voice calm. Elaine, I am at St. Adrian. Dr. Whitmore has denied me access to Caleb Thompson's surgery, ordered security to remove me, and stated white doctors only beyond this point inside the cardiac surgical wing. The silence on the other end lasted half a breath. Then Elaine said, Is Marcus Reed on site? Isaiah looked at Naomi. She nodded. State inspection today. Isaiah said, He is in the building. Elaine answered, Do not leave. Ask for the facility license record. I am calling the state office and St. Adrian Legal now. Isaiah ended the call. Whitmore folded his arms. Wonderful. Now we are performing phone theater. Elena Shaw stepped beside Isaiah. No, we are preserving patient safety. Whitmore turned to her. Dr. Shaw, I advise you to stay in your lane. She looked at Caleb. My lane is the patient. Maya spoke through tears. Someone please tell me if my son is still getting surgery. Isaiah turned to her fully. Maya, I came here to operate on Caleb. I will not let this hallway decide his life. Whitmore said, You will not promise anything in my hospital. Isaiah looked back at him. Then let us find out whose authorization opened this surgical suite. At 7:05, the elevator doors opened at the end of the corridor. Marcus Reed stepped out with a tablet in one hand and a state health department badge clipped to his jacket. He was not rushing, but every person in the hall shifted when they saw him. Inspectors have a way of entering a room that makes walls remember they are regulated. Whitmore tried to speak first. Mr. Reed, thank you for coming. We have an unauthorized individual attempting to enter a restricted surgical area. Marcus looked at Isaiah. Name. Isaiah answered, Dr. Isaiah Bennett. Marcus paused, only briefly, but Whitmore saw it. Naomi saw it too. Marcus typed something into his tablet. Whitmore said, "This is a security matter, not a license matter." Isaiah said, "He made it a license matter." Marcus did not look up. What was said, no one answered at first. Fear moved through the corridor. Then Naomi stepped forward. Dr. Whitmore said, "White doctors only, beyond this point." Whitmore snapped. "That is taken out of context." Elena Shaw said, "I heard it clearly." Malik Grant said, "So did I." Maya whispered, "So did my son." Marcus stopped typing. Then he looked at Whitmore. "Dr. Whitmore, I am ordering preservation of the access camera footage, surgical log entries, credentialing records, and all communications regarding Caleb Thompson's schedule." Whitmore's face changed. "Ordering?" Marcus said, "Yes." He turned the tablet slightly and opened the facility license search. St. Adrian Medical Center, Cardiac Surgical Suite, Specialty Operating Authority. Whitmore tried to regain control. "This is unnecessary." Marcus continued scrolling. Then the first page loaded. Licensed Operating Partner, Bennett Surgical Institute. Whitmore blinked. The corridor became very quiet. Marcus tapped the next field. Responsible Physician. The screen paused for 1 second, then the name began to appear. Isaiah Bennett. The name on the tablet was not a rumor. It was not a title Isaiah had claimed to win an argument. It was the state record. Responsible Physician, Isaiah Bennett. Dr. Harold Whitmore stared at the screen as if the letters had been placed there by mistake. Marcus Reed, the state health inspector, did not move the tablet away. He let the whole corridor see enough to understand that the man standing at the red line was not an intruder. He was the surgeon whose name allowed the cardiac surgical suite to operate. Nurse Naomi Brooks whispered, "I tried to tell you." Whitmore turned on her. "Not now." Marcus looked up. "Dr. Whitmore, do not silence clinical staff during an active license inquiry." That sentence changed the hallway. Not completely, but enough. The security guard stepped back from Isaiah. Dr. Elena Shaw moved closer to Caleb's bed. Malik Grant stood straighter near the scrub room. Maya Thompson still held her son's hand, but now her eyes moved from the tablet to Isaiah with a desperate kind of hope. Whitmore cleared his throat. "There has been a misunderstanding." Isaiah looked at him. "No. A misunderstanding is when a badge fails to scan. You gave an order." Whitmore tried to smile. "Dr. Bennett, had you identified yourself properly, this would not have happened." Naomi said, "I identified him." Whitmore shot her a warning look. Marcus spoke before he could say more. "Every statement from this point forward is part of the inspection record." That stopped him. Isaiah did not look victorious. The insult was still in the air. The child was still waiting. The operating room was still on a clock the body would not pause for paperwork. He turned to Elena Shaw. "How much time?" Elena looked at Caleb's monitor. He should be in the operating room within 30 minutes. Isaiah nodded. "Then we do 2 things at once. We protect the license record, and we protect the patient." Marcus tapped on his tablet. "I need the license conditions opened now. Facility agreement, operating authority, credential list, charity care schedule, and any communication about Caleb Thompson." Whitmore stiffened. "This is not necessary before the surgery." Marcus looked at him. "You ordered removal of the responsible physician from his own licensed suite. It is necessary." Naomi moved toward the nurse's station. "I can access the schedule log." Whitmore said, "Nurse Brooks, stand down." Isaiah turned. She works in this surgical wing. She reports to me. Not under this license, Isaiah said. The words were quiet. That made them heavier. Whitmore had built his authority on people stepping back when he spoke. Now the first person refusing him was not loud. He was precise. Naomi opened the scheduling terminal. The screen asked for her password. Her hand trembled once before she typed. Isaiah saw it. He understood. Courage in hospitals often did not look like speeches. It looked like a nurse entering a password while the person who could ruin her schedule stood 5 feet away. Marcus asked, "What is the status of Caleb Thompson?" Naomi read from the screen. Cardiac repair, operating room 3, scheduled for 7:30. Surgical lead listed as Dr. Isaiah Bennett. Anesthesia, Dr. Elena Shaw. Nursing lead, Naomi Brooks. Assistance program category confirmed yesterday. Marcus asked, "Any delay notes?" Naomi hesitated. Whitmore stepped forward. "Those notes are administrative," Marcus said. "Open them." Naomi clicked. A note appeared. "Defer if donor tour conflicts with surgical wing access." The corridor went still again. Maya looked at Naomi. "What does defer mean?" Naomi's voice softened. "It means delay." Maya looked at Whitmore. "You were going to delay my son because visitors were coming?" Whitmore said, "That is not what it means." Elena Shaw said, "That is exactly what it means." Isaiah stared at the note. Charity care patient, potential donor conflict. He had seen cruelty in many forms. The blunt form was terrible. The administrative form was worse because it could pretend nobody had been cruel at all. He closed his eyes for half a second. Then he saw his father. Not as a memory he invited, as a wound that knew the way back. Isaiah was 13 when his father, Thomas Bennett, came home from the garage, holding his chest and pretending it was nothing. Thomas fixed cars in a neighborhood where men learned to work through pain, because missing a day meant missing rent. Isaiah's mother, Ruth, was a community nurse. She took one look at her husband and said they were going to the hospital. The first emergency room was crowded. The second had a specialist on call, but no quick transfer. The family had weak insurance. The words moved around them. No available bed. Stabilize first. Transfer review. Financial verification. Isaiah remembered his mother standing at the desk, still wearing her clinic badge, saying, "My husband is not a form." By the time a surgeon saw Thomas Bennett, too much time had been lost. His father died before dawn. Later in the hallway, Ruth Bennett held Isaiah's shoulders and spoke through a grief that did not shake because it had become too deep. "There are doors in hospitals that open fast when the patient has money," she said. "And there are doors that open too late when the patient only has hope." That sentence followed Isaiah into medical school. It followed him through every operating room where he was mistaken for transport. It followed him through every donor dinner where people praised his work with poor patients, but asked whether the model could attract prestige. It followed him when he founded Bennett Surgical Institute. The institute had one purpose: bring excellent surgery to patients who were usually told to wait. Not second-tier surgery, not charity with old equipment, not care that made donors feel kind while patients stayed grateful. Real surgery, real standards, real accountability. 3 years before Caleb Thompson lay in the hallway of St. Adrian, the hospital had come to Bennett Surgical Institute in trouble. Its cardiac program had reputation, but not the license structure to expand. Its surgical suite needed updated protocols. Its nursing staff needed training. Its equipment plan was incomplete. Its charity care numbers looked good in brochures and weak in the operating schedule. St. Adrian needed Bennett name. Bennett Surgical Institute needed a facility where patients like Caleb could receive care without crossing 3 cities and 4 waiting lists. So Isaiah agreed, but not blindly. The agreement was signed in a ninth-floor conference room with lawyers on both sides. Operating partner, Bennett Surgical Institute. Responsible physician, Dr. Isaiah Bennett. Facility scope, St. Adrian Cardiac Surgical Suite. Conditions. Approved surgical access must be based on credential verification. Charity care commitments must be honored. No patient may be deferred for donor visibility, insurance preference, or image management when clinical urgency is documented. No hospital administrator may interfere with a credentialed surgeon assigned under the license. Any violation may trigger operational review, state reporting, and temporary control by the responsible physician for patient safety. Whitmore had attended that signing. He had smiled for photographs. He had shaken Isaiah's hand. But he had looked past the mission and seen only what the partnership gave St. Adrian. Prestige, donors, press releases, a cardiac suite he could call world-class. He had never believed the conditions would point back at him. Now they did. Isaiah opened his eyes in the surgical corridor. The past was gone. Caleb was still there. He looked at Marcus Reed. Under the license, I am assuming direct clinical authority for Caleb Thompson's surgery and for immediate safety operations in this suite. Whitmore said, "You cannot just take over." Marcus checked the tablet again. Under emergency operational safeguard, the responsible physician can assume direct authority if administrative interference threatens patient care or license compliance. Whitmore went pale. Marcus continued, "I am documenting that trigger now." Naomi exhaled softly, but she did not stop working. Elena said, "We need to move Caleb now." Isaiah stepped to Maya. "Miss Thompson?" She looked at him with wet eyes. "Is my son going to die because of this?" Isaiah answered carefully, "Your son is very sick. But we are not going to waste another minute on pride." Maya gripped Caleb's hand. "You are really the surgeon?" "Yes, they told me the doctor was famous," she whispered. "I thought famous doctors did not come for people like us." Isaiah's voice lowered. "The right ones do." For the first time that morning, Maya let go of a breath she had been holding since dawn. Isaiah turned to the team. "Operating room 3. Dr. Shaw, begin preparation. Naomi, confirm blood products and surgical tray. Malik, you assist only if your credential is already active in the system. No shortcuts. Everything documented." Malik nodded. "Active and verified." Marcus said, "I will remain in the wing and monitor compliance." Whitmore stepped in front of Isaiah one more time. "You are creating chaos in my hospital." Isaiah looked at him with a calm that frightened him more than anger would have. "No, I am removing chaos from the operating room." Then he looked at the security guard. "Nobody blocks credentialed clinical staff from this point forward unless the system denies access with a documented reason." The guard nodded quickly. "Yes, doctor." Whitmore heard the word, doctor. Not sir, not director. Doctor. A small title, moving to the person who had earned it. Caleb's bed began rolling toward the red line. Maya walked beside it until the boundary. She bent down and kissed her son's forehead. "I will be right here, baby." Caleb opened his eyes weakly. "Mom, I am here." Isaiah paused beside them. "Caleb, my name is Dr. Bennett." The boy blinked. "Are you fixing my heart?" Isaiah said, "I am going to do everything I know how to do." Caleb looked at the old brown surgical bag. "Is that yours?" Isaiah touched the handle. "It was my mother's bag." "Was she a doctor?" "No, she was a nurse. She taught me where doctors should stand." "Where?" Isaiah looked at Maya. "Between the patient and the door closing." Caleb seemed too tired to understand all of it, but he nodded. Then the bed crossed the red line. No one stopped it. That was the first victory. Not the record, not the license, not Whitmore's silence. The first victory was a sick child moving toward the room he should have entered without a fight. As the team entered the preparation area, Marcus Reed remained in the corridor with Whitmore. "We will need your office communications for the last 30 days, Marcus said. Whitmore regained some stiffness. "You can request them through legal." "I am requesting preservation now." "Fine. Including donor visit planning." Whitmore's face tightened. "That has nothing to do with the license." Marcus turned the tablet toward him again. "The scheduling note says otherwise." Whitmore looked away. Naomi returned from the scrub room of the checklist. Blood products confirmed, surgical tray confirmed, pediatric perfusion team on call and 2 minutes away. Operating room 3 ready. Elena called from inside. "We are inducing anesthesia in 5. Isaiah looked at Marcus. "Record that Dr. Whitmore is removed from any operational decision regarding this surgery." Marcus typed. "Recorded." Whitmore said, "This is temporary." Isaiah did not look at him. For Caleb, that is enough. Then he walked into the scrub room. The door closed behind him. The corridor noise softened. Water began running over his hands. Isaiah scrubbed in silence, wrist to elbow, finger to finger, nail to palm. Every motion exact, every breath measured. The insult could not enter the operating field. Whitmore's voice could not enter his hands. His father Death could not lead the scalpel. Only the patient could. Still, as he scrubbed, he looked once at the old surgical bag resting on the shelf outside the sterile zone. His mother had carried that bag through apartment buildings, church basements, school gyms, and kitchens where patients were too poor to visit doctors until pain forced them. She had once told Isaiah that medicine was not holy because of white walls or expensive machines. Medicine is holy when the person with knowledge refuses to walk away. He finished scrubbing. A nurse helped him gown and glove. Inside operating room 3, Caleb lay beneath the lights. Elena watched the monitors. Naomi counted instruments. Malik stood ready. The whole room had narrowed to a child heart and the people responsible for it. Isaiah stepped to the table. "Time." Elena answered. 7:29. Isaiah looked at the team. "We begin on time." Naomi's eyes met his above her mask. "On time," she repeated. Outside, Marcus Reed opened a preliminary inspection note. "Potential license violation. Administrative interference with responsible physician access. Discriminatory access statement reported by multiple witnesses. Charity care delay note identified. Immediate preservation required." He saved the entry. The file number appeared. SAMC 749. Whitmore stood behind him, watching the letters form. For the first time that morning, the hospital director understood that the hallway had stopped belonging to his version of the story. Inside operating room 3, Isaiah lifted his hand. "Scalpel." Naomi placed it into his palm. The surgery began. And while Caleb Hart became the only thing that mattered under the bright surgical lights, outside the room, the license file kept opening. Operating room 3 became quiet in the way only a serious surgery can become quiet. Not peaceful, focused. Every sound had a purpose. The monitor, the breathing machine, the metal instrument placed gently into an open palm. The soft confirmation from Dr. Elena Shaw as Caleb Thompson settled under anesthesia. Heart rate stable, pressure holding, oxygen level acceptable. Dr. Isaiah Bennett stood at the table with both hands steady. The anger from the hallway had not vanished. It had been placed outside the sterile field, where it belonged. In this room, there was no donor tour, no red line, no hospital director trying to defend his pride. There was only Caleb, a 10-year-old boy whose heart had waited long enough. Isaiah looked at Nurse Naomi Brooks. Confirm patient. Naomi read from the chart. Caleb Isaiah Thompson, age 10, scheduled cardiac repair. Consent signed by Maya Thompson. Charity care program confirmed. Bennett Surgical Institute supported case. Elena said, Anesthesia ready? Dr. Malik Grant stood across from Isaiah, scrubbed, credential verified, eyes sharper than fear. Isaiah looked at him. Dr. Grant. Yes, Dr. Bennett. You know why you are here. To assist. No. Malik blinked. Isaiah said, You are here because you are qualified to assist. For a second, Malik did not answer. Then he said, Yes, doctor. That mattered. Outside the operating room, Marcus Reed, the state health inspector, stood at the nurse's station with his tablet open and his badge visible. Dr. Harold Whitmore stood 3 steps away, no longer giving orders, but still trying to look like a man who had not lost the room. He had made a career out of recovery, not medical recovery, narrative recovery. When something looked bad, Whitmore knew how to rename it before anyone wrote it down. Delay became scheduling balance. Denial became policy alignment. Preference became patient comfort. Discrimination became standards. Now the inspector was writing faster than Whitmore could rename. Marcus said, I need the full cardiac suite access log for the last 90 days. Whitmore replied, That is excessive. Marcus did not look up. I did not ask for your opinion. The words were not loud. They were worse. They were official. Naomi had remained near the terminal after Caleb entered the operating room. She looked toward the door through which Isaiah had disappeared. She had told herself for months that speaking up would only make her a difficult nurse. She had told herself that patients still needed her inside the system, and if she was fired, they would have one less person watching. That had been partly true. It had also been partly fear. Now a child was on the table because Dr. Bennett had refused to let the system delay him. Naomi entered her credentials and opened the access report. The log appeared on screen. Cardiac Surgical Suite access, last 90 days. Credential verification events, manual overrides, secondary checks, denied badge attempts. Marcus leaned closer. Filter by secondary checks. Naomi did. The list shortened. Dr. Malik Grant appeared 12 times. Dr. Elena Shaw appeared once. 3 black residents appeared multiple times. 2 visiting white surgeons appeared 0 times. Marcus looked at Whitmore. Explain the difference. Whitmore folded his arms. Some staff require additional verification based on rotation status. Naomi said, Dr. Grant is on the permanent rotation list. Whitmore glared at her. Marcus asked, Can you show me the rotation status? Naomi clicked. Active, approved, no restriction. Marcus saved the screen. Dr. Grant was checked 12 times while active and unrestricted. Whitmore said, Security may have been cautious. Marcus looked at the security guard at the desk. What instruction were you given? The guard swallowed. Sir, Marcus said, speak clearly. The guard looked at Whitmore, then at the tablet. Dr. Whitmore office told us to double-check unfamiliar surgical staff during donor visit periods. Marcus asked, Define unfamiliar. The guard looked miserable. They did not define it. Whitmore cut in. This is a security interpretation issue. Marcus turned. Do not answer for him. The guard lowered his eyes. It usually meant people Dr. Whitmore did not recognize. Naomi looked down. Because she knew what that meant. So did everyone else. Inside operating room 3, Isaiah made the first incision. Caleb's body was small beneath the drapes. Every movement had to be exact, every choice had to respect how much life could depend on a few millimeters and a few seconds. Elena watched the monitors. Pressure slightly down. Isaiah did not look away. Supported. Medication ready. Give it. Naomi had assigned another nurse to her sterile duties before stepping out to help Marcus. That nurse now passed instruments with quiet precision. Malik followed Isaiah's lead, careful, controlled, trying not to think about the hallway. But he did think about it. White doctors only beyond this point. He had heard softer versions of that sentence since his first week in medicine. Are you transport? Are you here for housekeeping? The patient asked for the real doctor. Can someone verify your badge again? He had learned to keep a calm face because anger made people call him unprofessional. But in that operating room, Dr. Bennett had called him qualified. That one word steadied him more than he expected. Isaiah noticed. Dr. Grant? Yes. Suction here. Steady hand. Malik moved. Good, Isaiah said. A small word, a real one. In the hallway, Marcus moved from access logs to scheduling records. Naomi opened Caleb Thompson file. Maya Thompson watched from a chair near the family waiting area, close enough to see faces, too far to read the screen. Her hands held Caleb toy car. One red wheel was cracked. She turned it with her thumb again and again. Marcus asked, "When was Caleb cleared for surgery?" Naomi answered, "Yesterday at 4:12 in the afternoon. Charity care eligibility confirmed, medical urgency confirmed, operating room 3 assigned. Any later change?" Naomi clicked. A note appeared. Review placement due to donor tour traffic. Whitmore said, "That is logistical." Marcus said, "Next note." Naomi clicked. Defer if donor tour conflicts with surgical wing access. Maya stood. Defer. Marcus looked at the timestamp. 6:21 this morning. Author, Dr. Harold Whitmore. Whitmore's face tightened. That note did not cancel the surgery. Elena's voice came through the open communication line from operating room 3. It could have delayed it. Everyone turned toward the speaker. Elena continued. And delay increases risk. That is not a public relations issue. That is a medical fact. Whitmore stepped toward the speaker. Dr. Shaw, focus on anesthesia. Isaiah's voice came through next, calm and cold. She is focused on the patient. That is why she recognized the danger. Whitmore stepped back. Marcus saved the note. Then he asked, "Are there other charity care cases with similar scheduling notes?" Naomi did not answer immediately. Her hand hovered near the keyboard. She knew the answer might cost people more than comfort. Marcus said, "Nurse Brooks?" She looked at him. "Yes?" Whitmore said, "You do not know that." Naomi turned to him. "I know because I begged your office to stop doing it." The waiting area fell silent. Maya stared at her. Naomi's voice trembled, but she kept going. Patients from the South Ward and East Basin clinics were moved out of visible corridors during donor events. Some were not medically urgent. Some were. I filed staffing concerns twice. They were marked as tone issues. Marcus opened a new note. Names. Naomi swallowed. "I can pull them." Whitmore's voice lowered. "Think carefully." Marcus turned fully toward him. "Dr. Whitmore, that is the second time you have attempted to discourage a witness during this inspection." Whitmore said, "I am protecting the hospital from speculation." Marcus said, "You are protecting yourself from records." That landed. Naomi opened the archive. The first file appeared. Lena Ortiz, age 62. Valve evaluation. Charity care program. Delay note. Move to afternoon after donor walkthrough. The second. Marcus Bell, age 58. Emergency consult delayed pending financial clearance. The third, Tiana Reed, age 9. Diagnostic imaging rescheduled away from private tour.
Maya looked at the names with tears in her eyes. Children.
Naomi nodded. Not all, but some. Marcus saved the list. Whitmore tried again. St. Adrian treats thousands of patients. You are pulling isolated notes without context. A voice came from behind them. Then let us add context. Dr. Elena Shaw had not left the operating room. The voice came through the internal line again. Naomi, open the anesthesia delay reports from March and April. Naomi looked surprised. Elena continued. I filed 2 when charity care cases were postponed for non-clinical reasons. Whitmore muttered, those were reviewed. Elena said, they were buried. Marcus said, open them. Naomi typed. 2 reports appeared. Anesthesia concern, non-clinical scheduling interference, potential risk to medically vulnerable patients, filed by Dr. Elena Shaw. Resolution, no action needed. Reviewed by Harold Whitmore. Marcus asked, why was no action needed? Whitmore had no good answer, so he used an old one. Clinical leadership has to balance many priorities. Isaiah's voice came through from the operating room. A child heart is not one priority among donor traffic. No one spoke after that. Inside the operating room, the procedure had entered its most delicate phase. Isaiah requested the next instrument. Malik anticipated the move and placed suction before being asked. Isaiah nodded once. Better. Malik held steady. Elena watched the line. Pressure stable again. Good. Isaiah kept his eyes on the field. Outside, the donor tour arrived at the main elevator. 3 visitors stepped out with a hospital development officer. They wore dark coats and carried polite smiles. The development officer saw Marcus, Naomi, Whitmore, Maya, the security guard, and the frozen expressions in the surgical wing. Her smile disappeared. Dr. Whitmore, she said cautiously. The tour is here. Whitmore closed his eyes for half a second. The timing could not have been worse. Marcus looked at the visitors. This surgical wing is under active state inspection. Non-essential visitors will leave the controlled area. The development officer looked at Whitmore for rescue. He could not give it. Marcus repeated, now. The visitors stepped back into the elevator. For months, Whitmore had moved patients around donors. That morning, the donors moved around a patient. Maya saw it. So did Naomi. That was the second victory. Marcus returned to the terminal. I need email communications regarding donor tours and charity care scheduling. Whitmore said, you need a legal request. Marcus replied, under inspection authority and license conditions, I can require immediate preservation. Production can proceed through legal. Preservation begins now. He looked at Naomi. Can you send a preservation flag to medical records and information systems? Naomi nodded. Whitmore said, she is not authorized. Marcus said, I am authorizing her for preservation under inspection supervision. Naomi typed carefully. Subject, immediate preservation order. Cardiac surgical suite scheduling, access, charity care, donor tour communications, and credentialing logs. She paused. Marcus said, send. Naomi pressed the key. A confirmation appeared. Preservation hold active. Across the hall, the legal office phone began ringing. Whitmore looked at the screen as if the hospital itself had betrayed him. But it had only kept a record. Then Naomi opened the email archive. At first, she searched Caleb Thompson. 3 results. 1 from the charity care coordinator, 1 from Dr. Shaw, 1 from Whitmore. The email from Whitmore read, do not place charity cases near the surgical wing during premium donor visits. The tour must see excellence, calm, and appropriate patient profile. Maya read the words before anyone could stop her. Appropriate patient profile. Her voice was thin. My son was inappropriate. No, Isaiah said through the operating room line. The word came from the speaker, steady and immediate. Your son is a patient. Maya covered her mouth. Marcus saved the email. Then he searched the phrase, appropriate patient profile. Naomi watched the results count rise. 17. Whitmore said, that phrase is being misinterpreted. Marcus clicked the first result. A patient from East Basin. The second, a patient with Medicaid assistance. The third, a homeless veteran referred for cardiac evaluation. The fourth, a child from the South Ward Clinic. Naomi looked like she had been struck. I did not know there were this many. Whitmore said, because there are not. You are ignoring context. Marcus replied, context is exactly what we are collecting. Dr. Malik, Grant voice came from operating room 3, quiet but clear. Search my name in Access Communications. Everyone turned toward the speaker. Whitmore said, Dr. Grant, you are assisting in surgery. Do not involve yourself. Isaiah answered, Dr. Grant can speak if his hands remain steady. Malik did not look up from the field. My hands are steady. Naomi searched. Malik Grant. The first email was from security to Whitmore office. Dr. Grant badge cleared again. Please confirm whether to continue secondary checks. Whitmore office reply. Continue until further notice. Visitors must be fully verified during leadership review period. Marcus opened another. Dr. Grant questioned access process again. Request guidance. Whitmore reply. Remind resident that confidence does not equal clearance. Malik did not speak for several seconds. Then he said, I had cleared every credentialing step. Marcus saved the emails. Maya looked toward the operating room door with a new kind of anger. Not loud, deep. The kind that forms when fear realizes it has been managed by people who had other priorities. At 8:12, St. Adrian legal counsel arrived. Her name was Elaine Porter in the hospital file, but not the same Elaine as Bennett counsel. She was St. Adrian internal legal director, a woman with gray hair, careful eyes, and no patience for surprises. She looked at Marcus. Mr. Reed, I understand there is an inspection concern? Marcus replied, there is a license concern, an access discrimination concern, and a potential charity care interference concern. Legal counsel looked at Whitmore. His face told her too much. She said, Dr. Whitmore, do not speak further without me present. Isaiah's voice came through the operating room line. Too late for that. Whitmore looked like he wanted to tear the speaker from the wall. He did not. Legal counsel asked, Is Dr. Bennett in surgery? Marcus answered, Yes, under emergency operational safeguard as responsible physician. Her head turned quickly. Responsible physician? Marcus showed her the license record. She read the field. Then she looked at Whitmore in a way no employee had dared to look at him all morning. You removed him? Whitmore said, I did not recognize him. She asked, Did you check the credential system? No. Did you ask Dr. Shah? No. Did Nurse Brooks identify him? Whitmore did not answer. Naomi did. Yes. Legal counsel closed her eyes. Marcus said, There is more. He showed her the quote summary. White doctors only beyond this point. Her eyes opened, slowly. Dr. Whitmore. He said nothing. She looked at the access logs, then the donor emails, then the charity care delay notes. With each screen, her expression became less legal and more human. Maya stepped forward. My son is in that room because people argued over whether he should be seen before donors walked through. Legal counsel turned to her. "Miss Thompson, I am sorry." Maya's voice shook. "Do not be sorry to me yet. Make sure he comes out." Inside operating room 3, Caleb pressure dropped again. Elena spoke sharply. "Pressure falling." Isaiah did not hesitate. "Medication?" "Given." "Suction?" "Here." "Malik, retract slightly." "Yes." "More." "There." For several seconds, the room narrowed to movement and numbers. The corridor outside heard only fragments through the internal line. Then Elena said, recovering. Naomi closed her eyes. Maya gripped the toy car until her knuckles changed color. Isaiah's voice came through. "We continue. That was medicine, not image, not prestige, not donor management. A team refusing to let a child pay for a system failure." Marcus stepped away from the terminal and made a call to the State Health Department regional office. "This is Marcus Reed at St. Adrian Medical Center. I am opening an immediate facility license review for the cardiac surgical suite. Yes. Responsible physician access interference. Discriminatory statement reported by multiple witnesses. Charity care scheduling interference. Preservation hold active. File number, St. Adrian Medical Center, 749. Whitmore heard the words, facility license review. For the first time, he seemed to understand the scale. Not embarrassment, not complaint, not a difficult staff issue. A license review. A review that could shut down the very surgical wing he had used to impress donors. He turned to legal counsel. "We can contain this." She looked at him. "Dr. Whitmore, stop using that word, contain. It sounded too much like the truth." At 8:40, Marcus asked Naomi to print the license conditions. She did. 5 pages slid from the printer. Naomi placed them on the counter. Marcus read aloud the key section. "No administrator shall interfere with access by credentialed clinical personnel assigned under the licensed operating scope, except for documented safety cause." He looked at Whitmore. What documented safety cause existed for denying Dr. Bennett access? Whitmore said, "No visible badge." Marcus asked, "Did you offer badge verification?" "No." "Did security scan credential?" "No." "Did you check the surgical schedule?" "No." "Did you permit Nurse Brooks to complete identification?" Whitmore's jaw tightened. "No." Marcus continued. Next section. Charity care obligations shall be scheduled by clinical urgency and program eligibility. Donor presence, institutional image, and payer class shall not control access. Maya whispered, "Payer class." Naomi said softly, "Insurance." Maya looked at Whitmore. "You are sorting children by insurance." Whitmore said, "That is not fair." Maya answered, "Neither was the hallway." Nobody spoke. The printer kept humming. More pages, more logs, more evidence. By 9:05, the pattern was no longer hidden inside one insult. It had spread across access records, scheduling notes, emails, witness statements, delay reports, and license conditions. Whitmore had not created one ugly moment. He had revealed the operating system beneath the hospital polish. At 9:22, Elena's voice came through the speaker. "Repair complete. We are closing." Maya stood so quickly her chair moved back. Isaiah's voice followed. "He is stable." Maya began to cry without sound. Naomi covered her mouth. Malik said something too soft to catch. Marcus lowered his tablet for the first time. Even legal counsel looked toward the operating room door. Dr. Whitmore stood alone beside the red line. The same red line he had used to humiliate Isaiah. The same red line Caleb had crossed because Isaiah refused to move. The same red line now separating a hospital director from the only room where anyone still trusted the work more than the image. At 9:36, the operating room doors opened. Isaiah stepped out, still in surgical gown, mask lowered, eyes tired. Maya ran toward him. He raised one hand gently before she reached the sterile boundary. "Caleb is alive," he said. "The repair went well. He is not out of risk yet, but he made it through the surgery." Maya covered her face and sobbed. Isaiah stood still and let her cry. No speech could improve that moment. Then Maya lowered her hands and said, "Thank you." Isaiah looked at her. "Thank the team. They held the line." Behind him, Malik Grant stood in the doorway. Elena Shaw came out next. Naomi looked at them from the nurse's station. For 1 second, all of them understood the same thing. The line had changed meaning. Whitmore had drawn it to exclude. They had held it to protect a patient. Marcus approached Isaiah. "Dr. Bennett, the preliminary record is extensive. I am recommending immediate temporary removal of Dr. Whitmore from operational authority over the cardiac surgical suite, pending full review." Whitmore snapped. "You cannot do that based on one morning." Marcus looked at the stack of printed records. "This is not one morning. This is the morning the records became visible." Isaiah turned toward Whitmore. "You said this wing was for white doctors only." Whitmore's voice broke into anger. "I was protecting standards." Isaiah looked back at the operating room where Caleb was being prepared for recovery. "No, standards saved Caleb. You almost delayed him for image." Legal counsel spoke, quieter than before. "The board has been notified." Whitmore turned. "You called the board?" She replied, "The license required it." That was the next door opening, not for Isaiah, for the reckoning. Marcus saved the final note of the morning. Patient surgery completed under responsible physician authority. Administrative interference documented. License review escalated. Board notification active. The file was no longer a warning. It was moving upward, and Dr. Harold Whitmore, who had spent years deciding who looked like they belonged in St. Adrian Surgical Wing, was about to stand before the board and learn that a hospital license does not belong to pride. It belongs to patient safety. That sentence stayed in the surgical corridor after Marcus Reed said it. No one repeated it. No one needed to. Dr. Harold Whitmore stood beside the red line with his arms at his sides, watching the hospital he had controlled for years begin to move without waiting for his permission. Caleb Thompson was alive. That mattered most. But now the room outside the operating room had to answer for how close pride had come to delaying a child heart. Dr. Isaiah Bennett removed his surgical cap and placed it into the disposal bin. His face carried exhaustion, not triumph. The surgery had taken everything the team could give. He had no desire to turn a saved life into a stage. Marcus Reed stepped closer with his tablet. "Dr. Bennett, Caleb is in recovery." "Yes." "Dr. Shaw confirmed he is stable." "Yes." "Then I need your formal statement as responsible physician." Isaiah looked through the glass toward the recovery area where nurses were preparing Caleb transfer. "Give me 5 minutes with the mother first." Marcus nodded. "Of course." Whitmore stepped forward. "This inspection has gone far beyond the original concern." Marcus did not look at him. The original concern was a hospital director blocking a responsible physician from a licensed surgical suite after making a discriminatory access statement. Whitmore's voice tightened. "I reject that characterization." Legal counsel, Patricia Vale, spoke from near the nurses' station. "Dr. Whitmore, do not make another statement without counsel present." He turned toward her. "This is my hospital." Patricia looked at the license pages on the counter. That is becoming a complicated sentence. For the first time, Whitmore looked genuinely afraid. Not because someone had shouted, because the language of power had turned technical. And technical language was what he had always used to win. Now it was using him. In the recovery waiting area, Maya Thompson stood when Isaiah approached. She still held Caleb's toy car. The cracked red wheel rested against her palm. Isaiah stopped a respectful distance away. "He is stable," he said. "The repair went well. He will need close monitoring in the intensive care unit, but he has made it through the hardest part of surgery." Maya pressed the toy car to her chest. "Can I see him?" "Soon. The recovery team is preparing him now." She nodded, then looked toward the corridor. They were really going to make him wait? Isaiah did not soften the truth into something easier. Yes, because of the donor tour. Because someone put image before urgency. Maya's eyes filled again, but this time the tears were different. Will they pay for that? Isaiah looked through the glass at Whitmore. They will answer for it. She shook her head. I do not mean money. I mean, will they have to say what they did? Isaiah understood. Families who have been dismissed do not always want speeches. They want the record to stop lying. He said, yes, the record will say what happened. Maya looked down at Caleb's toy car. Then make sure it says he was not charity. He was my child. Isaiah's voice lowered. It will. That promise was not dramatic. It was exact. And that made it sacred. At 10:15, St. Adrian Board of Trustees convened an emergency session in the 7th floor conference room. Some members were present in person, others joined through secure video. The chief medical officer sat at one end of the table. Patricia Vale sat with hospital council notes in front of her. Marcus Reed sat beside a printed stack of preliminary inspection records. Naomi Brooks sat near the wall, still in scrubs, her badge clipped straight for once. Dr. Elena Shaw sat beside her, tired from surgery but unwilling to leave. Dr. Malik Grant stood near the back. He had not been invited at first. Isaiah asked that he be included as a credentialed staff witness. Whitmore entered last with his attorney on the phone. He did not wear his white coat now. Without it, he looked smaller, not powerless, still connected, still protected by years of institutional comfort, but no longer untouchable. The board chair, Evelyn Carr, opened the meeting. We are here because the state inspector has escalated a license review involving the cardiac surgical suite. Marcus spoke immediately. And because a patient care delay may have been attempted for non-clinical reasons. Evelyn turned toward him. Proceed. Marcus connected his tablet to the screen. The first image was the facility license page. St. Adrian Medical Center, Cardiac Surgical Suite. Licensed operating partner, Bennett Surgical Institute. Responsible physician, Dr. Isaiah Bennett. Marcus said, This is the authority structure under which the suite operates. Any administrative action affecting access by assigned clinical personnel must be grounded in documented safety cause. He changed the screen. Caleb Thompson schedule, surgery time 7:30, medical urgency confirmed, charity care eligibility confirmed, lead surgeon Dr. Isaiah Bennett. Then the delay note. Defer if donor tour conflicts with surgical wing access. Maya was not in the room, but her words seemed to stand beside the document. He was my child, not charity. Isaiah looked at the board. He kept his voice steady. Caleb Thompson was not delayed because the operating room was unready. He was not delayed because anesthesia was unavailable. He was not delayed because his mother failed paperwork. He was nearly delayed because his presence conflicted with a donor tour. Whitmore leaned forward. That is an unfair simplification, Elena Shaw answered before Isaiah could. It is medically accurate. Evelyn looked at her. Dr. Shaw? Elena sat straight. I was the assigned anesthesiologist. Caleb was clinically urgent. A delay for donor traffic had no medical basis. I filed similar concerns before. They were marked "No action needed" by Dr. Whitmore. Marcus opened the anesthesia delay reports. 2 reports appeared. Non-clinical scheduling interference. Potential risk to vulnerable patients. Reviewed by Harold Whitmore. Resolution: no action needed.
Evelyn Carr looked at Whitmore. Why were these closed without action?
Whitmore said they lacked full operational context.
Naomi spoke quietly. I provided context in the staffing notes. Marcus opened those too.
Naomi had written that charity care patients were being moved away from surgical wing visibility during premium donor visits. She had written that staff were being pressured to avoid placing low-income families in visible corridors when development tours were scheduled. Resolution: tone concern discussed with Nurse Brooks. Naomi looked at the board.
That means I was told to stop making the issue sound accusatory.
Whitmore said, because you were accusing the hospital without understanding donor management. Dr. Malik Grant stepped forward. Donor management made security scan my badge 12 times in 90 days. Marcus changed the screen. Access log, Malik Grant. Secondary checks, 12. Status, active approved, no restriction.
Marcus added.
Visiting white surgeons during the same period had no secondary check frequency approaching this number. Whitmore said, security may have been overcautious. Marcus opened the security email. Continue secondary verification during donor review period. Signed through Whitmore office. The room went still. Malik's voice remained controlled. Every time they stopped me, I had to decide whether to challenge it and be called difficult, or accept it and lose a little more of myself in the hallway. No one rushed to comfort him. That was good. Comfort too early can become another way to avoid responsibility. Evelyn looked at Whitmore. Did you order special verification based on race? No. Then what did unfamiliar mean? Whitmore did not answer. Isaiah said, it meant whoever did not match the picture in his head. Whitmore snapped, you do not know what is in my head. Isaiah turned toward him. I know what came out of your mouth. Marcus opened the witness summary. Reported statement. White doctors only beyond this point. Witnesses: Naomi Brooks, Dr. Elena Shaw, Dr. Malik Grant, Maya Thompson, Security Officer Alan Price, 2 surgical interns. Whitmore attorney spoke through the phone. We dispute the phrasing and context. Patricia Vale looked exhausted. The access corridor camera has audio. Everyone turned. Whitmore face changed. The camera footage played. The red line. Isaiah standing still. Naomi trying to speak. Whitmore cutting her off. Security moving forward. Maya beside Caleb's bed. Then Whitmore voice. White doctors only beyond this point. The words sounded worse in the conference room. In the corridor, they had been a blow. In the boardroom, they were evidence. The recording continued. Isaiah voice. Are you sure you want to say that in a surgical wing? Operating under my facility license? Whitmore laugh followed. Your license. The video stopped. No one spoke. Evelyn Carr put both hands on the table. Dr. Whitmore, he spoke too quickly. It was a terrible phrase, I admit that. I did not know who he was. Isaiah looked at him. That is not a defense. Whitmore turned to the board. Had I known he was Dr. Bennett, I would have handled the matter differently. Isaiah closed his eyes for one moment, not because he was surprised, because there it was, the confession hidden inside the apology. He opened his eyes. You just said the truth more clearly than any witness could. Whitmore frowned. Isaiah continued. You would have treated me better if you knew I had power over the license. That means the respect was never about policy. It was about fear. The room absorbed it. Whitmore tried to recover. That is not what I meant. Naomi said,
It is what patients without power hear every day. Evelyn turned to Marcus. What is the state position? Marcus spoke with official calm. I am recommending temporary removal of Dr. Whitmore from all operational authority over the cardiac surgical suite pending full investigation.
I am also recommending a corrective action plan under state oversight, preservation of all scheduling and access records, review of charity care compliance, and reporting to the licensing board. If the facility resists, suspension of the specialty operating authority is possible. The word suspension changed the room, not metaphorically, operationally. If the cardiac surgical suite license was suspended, St. Adrian would lose surgeries, donors, prestige, revenue, and the public image Whitmore had protected at the expense of patients. Evelyn asked Isaiah, "What is Bennett Surgical Institute position?" Isaiah did not answer immediately. He looked at Naomi, at Elena, at Malik, at Marcus, then at the printed license conditions on the table. "I could suspend our partnership today," he said. "The agreement gives Bennett Surgical Institute that right if administrative interference threatens patient care or violates access obligations." Whitmore stared at him. Isaiah continued, "But if I pull the license without a transition plan, patients suffer before administrators do." That silenced even Whitmore. Isaiah placed one hand on the table. "So we will not abandon the patients to punish the hospital. We will assume emergency operational control over the cardiac surgical suite under the license. Dr. Whitmore will be removed from all suite decisions. All charity care cases delayed in the last 18 months will be reviewed. Access verification will be based on credentials, not recognition. Any donor tour must be separated from active patient scheduling. Staff who reported concerns will be protected. And the board will sign a corrective action plan before close of business." Evelyn Carr looked at Patricia Vale. "Can he require that?" Patricia answered carefully. "Under the partnership agreement and the current license trigger, yes. If we refuse, the state could suspend the suite and Bennett Surgical Institute could withdraw operating support." Whitmore stood. "You are letting him take over part of the hospital." Isaiah did not raise his voice. "No, you let vanity take it over. I am giving it back to patients." Evelyn Carr looked at Whitmore. "Dr. Whitmore, sit down." He did not. "I have led this hospital for 9 years, and today," Evelyn said, "you nearly turned a living child into a scheduling inconvenience." Whitmore sat, not because he agreed, because the room had finally stopped orbiting him. The board moved to vote. Temporary removal of Dr. Whitmore from Cardiac Surgical Suite Authority. Approved. Emergency operational control by Bennett Surgical Institute under responsible physician oversight. Approved. State-supervised preservation of access logs, scheduling notes, donor communications, and charity care records. Approved. Independent review of all delayed charity care cardiac cases. Approved. Protection for Naomi Brooks, Dr. Elena Shaw, Dr. Malik Grant, and all staff witnesses. Approved. Suspension review for Dr. Whitmore position as hospital director. Approved for immediate investigation. Each vote was a door closing, this time on him. Whitmore stared at the table as the secretary recorded the decisions. The same man who had ordered security to remove Isaiah from the red line now had his own access restricted by written authority. At 11:48, Hospital Information Services disabled Whitmore administrative access to the cardiac surgical schedule. At 11:52, security received a new instruction. No clinical staff member with active credentials may be delayed for identity recognition. Badge system and schedule verification only.
At noon, the donor tour was officially canceled. The development officer looked shaken when she received the message. Then she did something unexpected. She sent the board a list of donors who had been shown polished wings while charity care patients were moved elsewhere. Subject: donor tour scheduling concern.
The pattern widened. By 1:15, Marcus Reed had opened a full inspection file. St. Adrian Medical Center, 749. He entered the findings in sequence. Responsible physician denied access. Discriminatory statement recorded. Credential process inconsistently applied. Charity care patient flagged for donor conflict. Prior staff concerns dismissed as tone issues. Administrative interference triggered emergency operational safeguard. He saved the file. The system sent automatic notice to the State Health Department Regional Director. Whitmore watched the notification from the conference room screen. He asked Patricia quietly, "Can this still be contained?" She did not look at him. No. It was the first honest answer he had received all day. At 2:30, Isaiah returned to Caleb's recovery room. Maya sat beside the bed. Caleb was asleep, pale but breathing steadily, tubes and monitors around him. The red toy car rested near his blanket. Maya stood when Isaiah entered. "He is doing well for this stage," Isaiah said. "The next 24 hours matter, but he is fighting." Maya looked at him. "What happened upstairs?" "The hospital board removed Dr. Whitmore from any decision about this surgical wing. The state review is active. Delayed cases will be examined." Maya held the bed rail. "Will other mothers have to beg like I did?" Isaiah looked at Caleb. "Not if the changes hold." She wiped her face. "Make them hold." He nodded. "I will." Caleb stirred slightly. Maya leaned down. "I'm here, baby." Isaiah watched them for a moment and felt the old grief return. His own mother in a hallway, his father waiting too long, the sentence that shaped his life. There are doors in hospitals that open fast when the patient has money. He touched the old brown surgical bag beside the door. "Not today, Mom. Not this one." At 4 o'clock, Naomi found him near the scrub station. She still looked tired, but something had changed in her posture. "Dr. Bennett?" "Yes, I should have spoken sooner." He did not answer quickly. She needed truth, not easy comfort. "Yes," he said. Naomi looked down. "I was afraid." "I know." "That does not excuse it." "No." She nodded as if the word hurt and helped at the same time. Then Isaiah said, "But today you spoke while the person who could punish you was still in the hallway. That matters." Her eyes lifted. "What happens now?" "Now we make sure speaking is not treated as misconduct." Naomi breathed out. "I can help with the case review. I was going to ask you to lead the clinical records side." She blinked. "Me?" "You know where the bodies were hidden in the schedule." Naomi closed her eyes briefly, then opened them. "I will do it." Across the corridor, Malik Grant signed his witness statement. He wrote down each secondary badge check he remembered. He wrote down the email line about confidence not equal to clearance. When he finished, his hand paused at the bottom. Marcus Reed said, "Take your time." Malik looked at him. "I kept telling myself it was too small to report." Marcus said, "Small things become systems when everyone is trained to swallow them." Malik signed. Then he walked back toward the surgical wing. At 5:30, St. Adrian issued an internal notice. The cardiac surgical suite will operate under Emergency Bennett Surgical Institute oversight pending review. Dr. Harold Whitmore is removed from all cardiac suite operational decisions. Staff are required to preserve records and report any access, scheduling, or retaliation concern directly to state-monitored compliance. The notice reached every nurse station, every operating room desk, every security post, every administrator phone.
At the red line, the same security guard who had almost obeyed Whitmore stood beside the scanner. Malik approached with his badge. The guard scanned it once. Green light. "Good evening, Dr. Grant." Malik stopped for half a second. Then he nodded. "Good evening." He crossed the line. No second scan. No call upstairs. No look toward Whitmore office. A small change. A real one. Whitmore saw it from the far end of the hallway. His office access still worked outside the cardiac wing, but the corridor had stopped responding to him. Nurses did not part when he walked by. Security did not wait for his glance. Administrators did not trail behind him. Power had not vanished. It had been relocated. From title to record. From image to license. From director pride to patient safety. At 6:10, Evelyn Carr called for a second emergency board session the next morning. The agenda was no longer limited to the cardiac suite. It now included hospital-wide access review, charity care compliance, donor influence on clinical scheduling, staff retaliation reports, and Dr. Whitmore leadership status. Patricia Vale sent the agenda to Isaiah and Marcus. The subject line was plain: Systemic Review of St. Adrian Medical Center Patient Access. Isaiah read it outside Caleb room. That was when he finally allowed himself one slow breath. Not relief, not yet. Because Caleb still had to recover. Because delayed patients still had to be found. Because staff who had been silenced still had to be protected. Because one insult had opened the license file, but the file had opened something larger. The hospital was about to learn that its problem was not one sentence in a hallway. It was every policy that made that sentence possible. By 7 in the morning, St. Adrian Medical Center no longer felt like the same hospital. The floors still shone. The donor wall still carried names carved in brass. The private elevators still opened quietly near the executive suite. But the surgical wing had changed in a way no decoration could hide. At the red line, security scanned badges by system record only. No second look. No quiet call upstairs. No guessing who seemed familiar enough to pass. Every credentialed physician, nurse, resident, and technician was verified by the same process. Dr. Malik Grant crossed into the wing at 7:12. One scan. Green light. "Good morning, Dr. Grant," the guard said. Malik paused for only a moment. "Good morning." Then he kept walking. It was a small thing, but to anyone who had been stopped 12 times for no written reason, a small thing could feel like oxygen. Nurse Naomi Brooks arrived 10 minutes later with a stack of printed schedules and a face that had not slept much. She had spent half the night pulling delayed charity care cases from the records. Some were routine delays, some were not. Some carried language that made her stomach turn. Move away from donor route. Hold pending financial optics. Review placement before premium visit. Patient profile not ideal for foundation tour. Every phrase sounded softer than harm. That was why it had lasted so long. Dr. Isaiah Bennett met her outside the nurses' station. "How many?" he asked. Naomi looked at the folder. "Enough that this cannot be called one director problem." Isaiah nodded. "Then we say that." She looked at him. "The board will not want to hear it." The board should have read it sooner. Naomi held the folder against her chest. "I helped schedule some of these transfers." Isaiah did not give her easy forgiveness. "Did you know why?" "Sometimes, not every time. But sometimes I knew enough to feel wrong and still followed the instruction." Her voice did not break. That made the confession stronger. Isaiah said, "Then today you do not hide behind the instruction." Naomi nodded. "I will not." At 8:30, the second emergency board session began. This time, the conference room was full. Trustees, medical leadership, compliance, legal counsel, State Health Inspector Marcus Reed, Dr. Elena Shaw, Dr. Malik Grant, Nurse Naomi Brooks. Maya Thompson, sitting near the end with Caleb toy car in her hand, while her son slept under observation in the intensive care unit. Dr. Harold Whitmore sat with his attorney. He looked different. Not guilty. Not humbled. Cornered. There is a difference. A guilty man begins to face what he did. A cornered man searches for the wall that still opens. Board Chair Evelyn Carr opened the meeting. Yesterday, this board removed Dr. Whitmore from operational authority over the cardiac surgical suite. Today, we determine whether the problem is limited to that wing or wider than we understood. Marcus Reed connected his tablet to the screen. The inspection record is no longer limited to one access incident. Whitmore's attorney spoke. We object to expanding the scope before full review. Marcus looked at him. The scope expanded when the records did. He opened the first file. Caleb Thompson. Charity care approved. Medical urgency confirmed. Delay note tied to donor tour. Then Lena Ortiz. Valve evaluation delayed. Reason listed. Donor route conflict. Then Marcus Bell. Cardiac consult delayed. Reason listed. Financial presentation concern. Then Tiana Reed. Age 9. Imaging rescheduled. Reason listed. Premium tour visibility. Maya gripped the toy car tighter. A board member whispered, "Children." Naomi stood. "May I speak?" Evelyn nodded. Naomi walked to the screen with the folder in her hands. For months, staff were told that donor days required calm corridors. We were told certain patients should not be placed near the wing during tours. The words changed, but the meaning did not. Poor patients, assistance program patients, patients from South Ward and East Basin, families who looked scared instead of polished, were treated like they disturbed the hospital image. Whitmore leaned forward. "That is a dramatic interpretation." Naomi turned to him. "No. Dramatic was a mother begging in a hallway while her son was almost delayed for visitors." The room went silent. Whitmore had no easy answer because Maya was sitting there. Maya lifted her eyes. "My son was not scenery. He was not a problem for your brochure. He was a child whose heart needed repair." No one interrupted her. She continued. "I do not understand all your license words. I do not know your policies. But I know what it feels like when people talk around you because they think you have no power. I know what it feels like to hold your child hand and wonder if the hospital is deciding whether he is worth being seen." Isaiah looked down at the table. His mother had once stood in a hallway with the same kind of fear. Maya placed Caleb's toy car on the table. This was in his hand when they moved him. He asked me if the doctor was coming. I told him yes, because I had to believe somebody in this building remembered what a hospital was for. The board did not move. The toy car sat in the middle of the table, like evidence no legal team could soften. Dr. Elena Shaw spoke next. "I filed 2 reports about non-clinical scheduling interference. Both were closed without action by Dr. Whitmore. I was told my language was too accusatory. Malik Grant followed. I was stopped repeatedly despite active credentials. The access system cleared me. The people around the system did not. Marcus opened the access data. The pattern appeared on screen. Credentialed Black and minority staff received secondary verification far more often than comparable staff with the same clearance level. Whitmore said security was trying to protect patient safety. Isaiah finally looked at him. Patient safety was in operating room 3 with Caleb. What you protected was an image. Whitmore snapped, "I will not be judged by one sentence spoken under pressure." Marcus changed the screen. The corridor footage appeared again. Whitmore's voice filled the room. "White doctors only beyond this point." Then his later statement appeared from the board transcript. "Had I known he was Dr. Bennett, I would have handled the matter differently. Marcus paused the screen. The first sentence shows exclusion. The second shows conditional respect. Evelyn Carr looked at Whitmore. "Dr. Whitmore, do you dispute your own words?" Whitmore swallowed. "I regret the phrasing." Isaiah said, "Stop calling it phrasing." Whitmore turned toward him. "What would you like me to call it?" Isaiah's voice stayed calm. The truth escaping before policy could dress it. Nobody breathed for a moment. Then Isaiah continued. "You thought I did not belong because you did not recognize my power. You thought Caleb could wait because his mother had no donor badge. You thought Dr. Grant could be checked again because his credentials did not matter as much as your comfort. You thought Naomi and Dr. Shaw would be too afraid to keep pushing. That was not one phrase. That was governance." Evelyn Carr lowered her eyes to the record. The board went into closed session at 10:20. Whitmore waited outside with his attorney in a small consultation room. For years, people had waited outside his office while he decided what their lives would become. Patients, nurses, residents, families, staff who wanted to report concerns. Now he was the one waiting. At 11:45, he was called back. Evelyn Carr read from the board decision. Dr. Harold Whitmore is suspended from his role as hospital director, pending termination review and external investigation. His clinical administrative access is revoked. He is barred from contacting witnesses, altering records, or entering the cardiac surgical suite. The board will refer the inspection record and related evidence to the state licensing board and appropriate oversight agencies. Whitmore stared at her. After 9 years. Evelyn did not soften. After what the record shows. His attorney touched his arm. Whitmore sat back slowly. The first consequence had arrived. But Isaiah did not smile. One man losing a title did not fix a hospital. Evelyn continued. St. Adrian Medical Center will enter a corrective action agreement with the State Health Department and Bennett Surgical Institute. Marcus read the terms. All cardiac charity care cases delayed in the last 2 years would be reviewed. All access control procedures would be rebuilt around credential records only. All secondary checks would require a documented safety reason. All donor tours would be separated from active patient routing. All patient scheduling decisions would be audited for payer class and neighborhood bias. Staff retaliation complaints would go directly to independent compliance. The cardiac surgical suite would remain under Bennett Surgical Institute operational oversight until St. Adrian passed 2 consecutive state reviews. A patient access council would be created. Maya Thompson would be invited to serve as a family representative. Naomi Brooks would lead clinical records review with protection from retaliation. Dr. Malik Grant would help redesign credential verification training. Dr. Elena Shaw would chair the Patient Safety Committee for surgical scheduling. Every trustee signed before leaving the room. No applause followed, only signatures. That was right. Systemic harm should not end with celebration. It should end with binding terms. In the days that followed, the hospital began to look at itself in ways it had avoided for years. The audit found 37 charity care cardiac cases delayed for non-clinical reasons. 11 were clinically concerning. 4 required external referral after preventable delays. 2 families had filed complaints that were marked as communication issues. Those complaints were reopened. Letters went out. Not polished letters, direct ones. St. Adrian Medical Center acknowledges that your care or your family member care may have been affected by non-clinical scheduling criteria inconsistent with our obligations. Your case is under independent review. Counsel and patient advocacy support will be provided. Some families cried when they received the letters. Some became angry. Some said they had known all along. The hospital had not given them new pain. It had finally stopped denying the old pain. Dr. Whitmore's termination became final 3 weeks later. The public statement named leadership failure, discriminatory access practice, patient scheduling interference, retaliation concerns, and failure to comply with license obligations. His medical administrative privileges were reported to the state board for review. When he left St. Adrian for the last time, no one escorted him through the surgical wing. His badge no longer opened that door. At the red line, he stopped and looked once toward the corridor. The same guard scanned Malik Grant through. One scan, green light. Whitmore turned away. The door closed behind him without drama. The real work continued. Naomi spent long evenings comparing schedules against clinical notes. Sometimes she found ordinary delays, sometimes she found harm. Each time she found harm, she logged it plainly. No soft words, no donor language, no image language. Delayed for non-clinical visibility concern. Moved despite medical priority. Additional financial paperwork requested after eligibility confirmed. She hated typing those sentences. She typed them anyway. Elena rebuilt the scheduling protocol so clinical urgency came first, then operating room availability, then patient readiness. Donor events were placed on a separate calendar that could not override medical priority. Malik trained security and residents together. He stood at the red line and said, "A badge is not a suggestion. A credential is not more valid when the face wearing it is familiar to you."
The security guard who had hesitated on the first morning raised his hand.
"What if an administrator tells us to double-check someone?" Malik answered, "Then you ask for the documented safety reason. If there is none, you follow the system, not the bias." Marcus Reed returned every month for state monitoring. He did not give speeches. He checked logs. That was how trust was rebuilt, not by declarations, by records behaving differently. Caleb recovered slowly. There were hard days, fever scares, medication changes, nights when Maya slept in a chair and woke at every monitor sound. Isaiah visited when he could, never as a hero, never with cameras, always with a quiet question. How is he breathing today? 3 months later, Caleb walked into St. Adrian for follow-up, holding the same red toy car. The cracked wheel had been repaired with a tiny metal pin. He moved carefully, but he moved on his own. Maya walked beside him. When they reached the red line, Caleb stopped.
"Is this where the man said you could not go?"
Isaiah looked at the line. Yes. Caleb looked at the new sign above it. Credentialed clinical personnel only. Patient access by medical need. Dignity is required in every direction. Caleb sounded out the word dignity. What does that mean? Maya answered before Isaiah could. It means they have to see you like you matter. Caleb nodded, satisfied. Then he walked past the line toward the examination room. No one stopped him. 6 months after the hallway incident, St. Adrian held no ribbon cutting. Isaiah refused one. He said the hospital did not need a ceremony for doing what it should have done. Instead, there was a morning training session in the old donor conference room. The room had been renamed the Ruth Bennett Patient Access Room. Isaiah did not tell anyone at first why he chose the name. Naomi asked him after the meeting. "Ruth was your mother?" Isaiah nodded. "Community nurse. She spent her life getting patients through doors that should have opened sooner." "And your father, Thomas Bennett, mechanic. He died waiting for a transfer that came too late." Naomi looked at the room name again. "That is why you built the institute. That is why I built it with conditions." She understood then. The license was not just legal authority. It was a promise written in administrative language. A promise that the next family would have a record strong enough to fight back. Maya joined the Patient Access Council that winter. At her first meeting, she did not speak for the first 20 minutes. Then a hospital administrator used the phrase, "low-value patient flow." Maya raised her hand. "Do not say low value in a hospital." The administrator blinked. "I meant reimbursement."
"Then say reimbursement," she said. "My son heard enough words that made children sound like problems."
The phrase was removed from the draft policy.
That was reform, not a slogan on a wall.
A mother stopping one harmful word before it became a rule. Dr. Malik Grant completed his rotation and stayed at St. Adrian under the new Surgical Equity Fellowship. The first day he supervised residents, a young black medical student entered the wing and hesitated at the scanner. Malik noticed. "You are cleared," he said. She smiled nervously. "I know." "Then walk like it." She scanned once. Green light. Naomi watched from the nurse's station. A year earlier, she might have looked away and told herself the system was too large. Now, she wrote the moment into the training notes. Confidence, supported by fair process, improves safety culture. It sounded administrative. This time, it was true. Isaiah kept the old brown surgical bag in his office at Bennett Surgical Institute. He did not use it for surgeries anymore. The leather was too worn. The handle had been repaired twice. Inside, he kept a folded copy of the St. Adrian Corrective Action Agreement and a small card Caleb had drawn during recovery. It showed a hospital with a red line on the floor. On one side was a sad face. On the other was a heart. Above the drawing, Caleb had written in uneven letters, "The doctor came through." Isaiah placed the card beside the bag. Some days he still thought about Whitmore's voice, white doctors only beyond this point. He thought about what would have happened if Naomi had stayed silent, if Elena had treated the delay as politics, if Malik had swallowed one more insult, if Maya had believed she was powerless, if Marcus had accepted the first explanation, if Isaiah had let anger close the suite instead of using authority to keep Caleb safe. Justice was not one heroic moment. It was a chain of people deciding the record would not lie anymore. The final state report was released 13 months after the incident. St. Adrian Medical Center passed its second monitored review. The cardiac surgical suite remained open. Bennett Surgical Institute continued oversight for another year, by choice, not emergency order. Charity care compliance improved. Access delays dropped. Secondary credential checks became rare and documented. Staff reporting increased at first, then stabilized as retaliation fear decreased. The hospital was not perfect, no hospital is, but it had changed in ways that could be measured. That mattered to Isaiah, because his father did not die from one cruel sentence. He died inside a system where delays could be explained until nobody had to feel responsible. Isaiah had spent his life building something that made responsibility harder to escape. On the anniversary of Caleb's surgery, Maya brought her son to Bennett Surgical Institute. Caleb was taller now. He still carried the red car, though more out of habit than need. He handed Isaiah a small envelope. "My mom said I should write thank you," he said. Isaiah opened it later, alone. Inside was a drawing of a door. Not a hospital, not a surgical room, just a door held open by many hands. Under it, Caleb had written one sentence. "No one should wait outside when their heart is tired." Isaiah sat with that sentence for a long time. Then he placed it inside his mother-old bag. Not because the story was over, because the work was not. The next morning, he walked through St. Adrian Cardiac Surgical Wing at 6:48, the same time the insult had happened 1 year before. The red line was still there. But it no longer belonged to fear. It belonged to safety. A nurse crossed with supplies. A resident crossed with a verified badge. A mother crossed beside a child being wheeled toward surgery. Security checked the system, not the face. Naomi nodded from the desk. Malik passed with 2 students. Elena reviewed the surgery board. Marcus' Reed's name appeared on the next monthly inspection calendar. And Isaiah Bennett, the man once ordered out of the very suite his license kept alive, stood at the boundary and watched the door open again and again. He did not need an apology from the wall. He needed it to move correctly. That was enough. Dr. Whitmore had thought he was protecting prestige when he said only white doctors could pass. He did not know the surgeon he tried to remove had built the license, the program, and the conditions that made the cardiac suite possible. But the true reversal was not that Whitmore lost power. The true reversal was that the hospital lost the right to hide harm behind image. From then on, access at St. Adrian was based on credentials. Care was based on need. Dignity was not delayed for donors. And every time a patient crossed that red line toward the help they needed, the hospital answered the only question that had ever mattered. Not who looks like they belong here,
Who needs care now?